The sword screamed when I touched it. Not a metaphor. An actual shriek, the kind a tea kettle makes if tea kettles could hold grudges. And then it launched me 8 feet through the air into a wall of nobles who had all apparently chosen that exact moment to lean in for a better look at my humiliation. That was the first sign the universe had a personal problem with me. The second sign was that, while lying on the floor with a concussion blooming behind my eyes, my brain's solution was, grab a spoon. 300 of us stood packed into the trial hall of Oralisk, a ceiling full of drifting lights that the tour guide had cheerfully informed us were the recorded final thoughts of the mages who built the place, which is a deeply unhinged thing to put in a school brochure. Ahead, 100 pedestals held 100 relics, swords wreathed in lightning, spears dripping actual starlight, a shield shaped like a screaming face that blinked at people it didn't like. The room smelled like ozone, old candle wax, and the particular flop sweat of 300 teenagers about to find out their entire future personality in the next 10 minutes. Somewhere overhead, the trial itself seemed to stir. The relic bonding trial had begun. It was time to choose. I hadn't even wanted the sword. I wanted the spear, Reaper's Toll, the one that supposedly ended a war before lunch. But Denholt Vray got there first, wearing the smug expression of a boy who practices humble in the mirror and still can't land it. So I grabbed the sword out of pure spite, and the sword, in turn, treated me like an X it had blocked on every platform. Every relic in the hall was busy accepting someone. Denholt's spear bonded with a thunderclap that dropped 3 girls into dead faints. A girl named Iressa got a warhammer that hummed her a lullaby, her eyes going soft and glassy, which nobody found alarming for some reason. A boy named Marn reached for a bow made of black glass, and his entire forearm turned see-through with gold veins running underneath, and the healers just walked him to a chair, like this was Tuesday. I had 90 seconds left and a room full of relics that had already made other plans. The timer was expiring. Anyone left unbonded, the trial warned, would be marked voidborn. Voidborn. I'd heard upperclassmen say it the way you'd say expelled or moved back in with your parents. No relic, no class, no rank, just quietly deleted from the roster and mailed home like a return package. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't fear exactly. It was the very specific horror of being about to become the answer to a trivia question nobody wanted to ask. That's when I spotted it. Half crushed under an overturned refreshments cart by the kitchen entrance, somebody's forgotten catering supply. A spoon. Bent. Rusted past the point of being useful for soup, let alone heroics. The single least legendary object in the history of legendary objects. I grabbed it because dignity is a luxury for people with 91 seconds left on the clock. The room didn't scream this time. It went dead silent, which honestly felt worse. 300 heads swiveling toward the sound of absolutely nothing happening. Somewhere in the silence, the trial itself seemed to hesitate. An unknown item. Something outside anything it had ever cataloged. It kept processing and processing and processing. And then, almost sheepishly, it admitted this was taking longer than usual. That last part was new. The trial had never apologized for anything in its life, and now it was giving me hold music energy. Somewhere behind me, Denholt's laugh rang out, delighted. The laugh of a boy who had just been handed a story he would dine out on for the rest of his academic career. He's bonding with a spoon. Somebody alert the healers. Kale's finally cracked. The spoon bit me, not figuratively. Teeth, actual, tiny, needle-thin teeth, unfolded out of the bowl of the spoon and sank clean through my palm, and the pain was so specific and so rude that I couldn't even scream properly. Just made a noise like a kettle that had given up on boiling and decided to cry instead. Rust peeled off the handle in a spiral and floated upward, catching the dead mage starlight and burning it gold. Underneath the rust, the metal wasn't silver. It was a black so complete it looked less like a color and more like a hole somebody had carefully spooned out of reality and forgotten to fill back in. Somewhere beneath the pain, I felt the trial itself buckle. Whatever this was, it exceeded every category it had ever known, and it was rewriting itself in real time to make room for me. For legal reasons it wanted me to know, it hadn't seen this coming either. The overhead lights didn't flicker. They fled, every last drifting soul light bolting for the corners of the room like startled pigeons, and for 3 full seconds, the only light source in the entire hall was the small, hungry darkness now attached to my hand. A voice cut through the dark that wasn't the trial's chipper little chime. It was low, grinding, the sound a mountain would make, clearing its throat before telling you to get off its property. The hollow ladle, it said, recognized a devourer. The bond was accepted. Every relic in the room reacted like I'd walked in wearing their ex's cologne. Denholt's spear went dark mid-flex, the lightning snuffing out so fast he nearly dropped it on his own foot. Iressa's warhammer stopped humming, and she blinked back into her own eyes like someone had just switched the lights on in an empty house. She looked furious, actually, like she wanted her lullaby back. 3 relics across the hall simply gave up on their new owners entirely, clattering to the floor mid-bond with what I can only describe as an audible, metallic sigh of nope. I looked down at the thing in my hand. It was not, structurally speaking, a spoon anymore. The bowl had deepened into something closer to a small patient mouth, rimmed in that light-eating black, and when I tilted it toward the ceiling, it didn't reflect a single photon. It just drank the light traveling near it, dragging a little circle of true dark along wherever I pointed the handle. A new title settled over me like a brand: the Hollow Spoon. With it came a skill: Skim, the ability to consume a fraction of any active enchantment within reach, and another, Palate, the ability to taste magic itself, though I was warned this would rarely be pleasant. And somewhere in the background, quietly, the trial flagged an investigation. 40 relics affected. 40 bonds compromised. 40. I had broken 40 strangers' magical destinies in under 15 seconds using cutlery, and I still didn't know what the thing in my hand actually did beyond making an entire room recoil from me like I'd walked in with something contagious. Instructor Vel came down off the dais at a speed that suggested she had personally drilled for this exact scenario. Silver hair shaved on one side, the kind of scar you keep on purpose because it saves you from having to explain the story every week. She wasn't looking at me like I was a joke anymore. She was looking at me like I was a grease fire she hadn't finished smothering. "Put it down," she said, quiet in the way that means the loud version is coming next. "Right now. Put it down, cadet." I tried. My fingers didn't get a vote. Whatever this bond was, it made clear, in that same low grinding voice, that it could not be released. Not voluntarily, not by me. Her hand moved to the blade on her hip, a relic the deep red of old blood. And I understood, with the specific clarity you only get right before something terrible, that she wasn't reaching for it out of caution. Auralisk Academy apparently had a very old, very specific protocol for what happens when something the trial has never met walks into the hall wearing a student's face. And that protocol did not include a stern talking to. The lights along the walls started drifting back down, slow and suspicious, the way a cat returns to a room after you've dropped something loud in it. In my defense, I said, mostly to buy time, it was the only relic still returnable. Vel's blade cleared its sheath by an inch. That is not a defense. It's a start. She didn't lunge. That was somehow scarier than if she had. Instead, she raised 2 fingers, and a rune bloomed in the air above her palm. A containment glyph I recognized from the safety pamphlet nobody reads, the one titled, "What to Do If a Relic Achieves Sentience and Hostility." I had, in fact, read it, mostly out of boredom, and I remembered exactly one useful fact from it. Containment glyphs work by draining ambient magic out of whatever they're cast around, which meant it was, functionally, a very fancy version of what my spoon already did for free. The glyph snapped shut around me like a soap bubble made of judgment. I felt it start to pull, and felt the hollow ladle, without any input from me whatsoever, lean into it. Whatever it was doing, it worked. It had consumed a piece of an active containment glyph, and Instructor Vel had absolutely noticed. The glyph didn't just fail, it inverted, snapping back toward Vel instead of me, and she had to throw herself sideways to avoid getting wrapped in her own spell. Robes flaring, silver hair coming loose from its shaved clean side, in a way that suggested this had never once happened to her, in a career that clearly involved a lot of things happening to other people. 300 students had gone from murmuring to absolutely silent to now, collectively, making the specific noise a crowd makes when it realizes it is watching something that will be retold at every dinner table in the kingdom by morning. "It ate her spell," someone whispered, in the tone usually reserved for eclipses. "It didn't eat it," Denholt said, delighted all over again, apparently incapable of not narrating my life out loud. "It stole it. He stole a professor's magic with a soup spoon." I would like to say I had a plan at this point. I did not. What I had was a bleeding hand, cutlery with opinions, and an instructor picking herself up off the floor with an expression that had graduated from grease fire to structural collapse. Somewhere in the back of my mind, another skill settled into place. Regurgitate, the ability to release a consumed enchantment back into the world, though with modifications that were, apparently, entirely up to whatever force was rewriting the rules around me. I got the distinct impression that testing this indoors was a bad idea. I tested it indoors. I don't know what came over me. Mild panic, the audience, the fact that 14% of a professional containment spell was sloshing around inside a haunted spoon, and some animal part of my brain decided sloshing around sounded like a problem I should solve immediately by pointing it at something. But I flicked my wrist toward the nearest pedestal, the one still holding Reaper's Toll. The spear Denholt hadn't managed to bond because he'd been too busy narrating my humiliation to notice his own trial timer running out. The regurgitated magic hit the spear like a wet towel snapping across a dinner table. The spear did not react the way anyone, myself included, expected. Reaper's Toll, a weapon rumored to have ended an entire war before lunch, let out a sound like a teenager whose voice was cracking for the first time, wobbled on its pedestal, and then, very slowly, folded itself into the shape of a slightly smaller, slightly embarrassed butter knife. The hall went, if possible, even quieter than before. An achievement settled over me, unasked for, culinary devastation. I had downgraded a legendary rank relic by consuming and misapplying borrowed containment energy, and whatever was keeping score informed me, almost apologetically, that this had no precedent and therefore no reward attached. Then, very quietly, almost like an aside, it let me know that it had found the whole thing extremely funny. Denholt made a noise I can only describe as the sound of a man watching his own future dissolve. That was going to be my... You turned Reaper's Toll into a butter knife. Skill issue, I said, and immediately regretted it because Instructor Vel's head snapped toward me with the exact same expression my mother used to get right before grounding me for a month. But underneath the panic, underneath the very real possibility that I was about to be arrested by a teacher wielding a blood-red sword in front of 300 witnesses, I felt something else stir at the edge of my thoughts. Small, patient, satisfied, and utterly certain of one thing. It was hungry again, and this time it wasn't looking at containment glyphs. It was looking, very deliberately, at the blade in Instructor Vel's hand. A new sense sharpened inside me. Appetite, it was called. The hollow ladle had identified a preferred meal. Somewhere in the back of my head, a warning surfaced, clear and insistent, that the target was a licensed academy instructor, that this was generally considered a very bad idea, and, for what felt like the first time in its entire existence, that it meant that. It really, truly meant that.